everyone, this is Dr. Salcedo, your conscious gynecologist. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about uterine fibroids and what they are trying to tell women. Now, one of the most exciting and most gratifying things that I do in my counseling with women with gynecologic problems is to discuss why things might be happening to them according to their womanhood and the surrounding lifestyle. And this is such a gratifying part of my practice. And if you do like this kind of approach, go ahead and like my channel. Go ahead and subscribe and share with a friend. I can't wait to get to this with you and teach you exactly what uterine fibroids are trying to tell you. Uterine fibroids are benign growths within the uterus that are calcified, collagenized matrices that look like little balls within the wall of the uterus, within the surface of the uterus, or even within the lining of the uterus. And oftentimes they can cause a lot of pelvic discomfort, they can cause pelvic pain, they can cause stretching in the lining of the uterus that leads to heavy periods, they can cause bulk symptoms like constipation or even pain with intercourse. They are a really big problem, and about 70% of women in North America will have fibroids in their life. And 1 in 3 women who end up having a hysterectomy will have a hysterectomy because of uterine fibroids. They're a huge problem. And just because they're a benign disorder doesn't mean that they're not intrusive to our life. And so what I want to teach ladies is that, is there a genetic predisposition to fibroids? Absolutely, there is. There are all kinds of different polymorphisms or genetic collections that can kind of get turned on but passed down from generation to generation, and those genes get turned on depending on our environment. It's called epigenetics. And so there is not necessarily like a fibroid gene, but there is collections of polymorphisms or changes within our genetic code that can predispose us to expressing uterine fibroids. So most importantly though, what are some of the epigenetic factors that can help these fibroid genes or collections of polymorphisms turn on? Well, it's a lot of the lifestyle associations that we see. Fibroids are associated with so many lifestyle functions, and they have to do with metabolic disease. Women who have fibroids are more likely to have hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, visceral adiposity, which means a collection of that belly fat that is really hard to get rid of, insulin resistance, stress. A lot of women with fibroids have those associations. And so why is that? Well, let's take a look. The same concepts of endothelial inflammation and insulin resistance ring true here. So when there is excess insulin from many different phases of our life, from maybe eating too much carbohydrates or processed food, from maybe not sleeping well, from being maybe smoking, from maybe having a relationship with your partner that is not healthy, or maybe family relationships or financial stress, all those things raise our insulin levels. And insulin is very inflammatory. It causes a lot of release of damaging cytokines or proteins that cause a lot of autoimmune damage within the lining of our blood vessels, and that can lead to restructuring and damage within the lining of the blood vessels. The other thing that can cause fibroids to turn on is something called endothelial inflammation. And so not only is it from the current stress or lifestyle or consumption of different foods that our body goes through, but endothelial inflammation is something that damages the walls of the blood vessels. Now, why do I keep talking about blood vessels? Well, if you look at it, the uterus is actually one big blood vessel. is actually made of the same structures, the same progenitor myocytes, the same muscle cells as our arteries and our veins. And so when we go through a lot of different stressful situations, when we are exposed to different damaging endothelial inflammatory molecules, it actually breaks down and impairs the inside lining of our blood vessel. And that blood vessel is also our uterus because it's made of the same structure. And so then our uterus starts to undergo reparative processes to alleviate that damage. Now, once in a while, when we go through certain damaging and stressful events or exposures in our body can handle it. But chronically, over and over, these microscopic paper cuts that damage the uterus and damage our blood vessel can lead to atherosclerotic disease, which is hardening of the arteries. And so even since the 1960s, we knew that the same progenitor myocytes, the same muscle cells that cause hardening of the arteries, were the same ones that cause uterine fibroids. And so when I teach women those concepts, it's very eye-opening because then we can look at uterine fibroids as a metabolic disease. We can look at it as, wow, maybe we can do something to treat our fibroids if they're not very intrusive in our lives and create a preventive strategy. And so when we look at women who have fibroids, these inflammatory cascades that occur actually lead to the extracellular matrix remodeling. So the structures of the cells, but within the cell, but the outside of the cell start to remodel and turn into those fibrotic balls that we see on the uterus, but also hardening of the arteries. And so not only does that remodeling occur at the body of the uterus, on the surface of the uterus, in the wall of the uterus, but that inflammation also can occur in the lining of the uterus and make the cells or the blood vessels within the lining of the uterus not function as well and lead to heavy periods. And so that is a really interesting concept when I teach people how the metabolic dysfunction in our life can lead to really serious metabolic and gynecologic problems. So what is the association and what do we do? Well, we look at a lot of different labs, and when I see patients in clinic, with gynecologic problems, I look at all kinds of different lab testing. I look at their lipid panel, their triglycerides, their HDL. I look at insulin levels. We also look at hemoglobin A1C and vitamin D levels. We look at liver function. We look at whether they're anemic. We look at luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone and testosterone, because all of those variations can indicate a metabolic problem. And those metabolic problems can be subtle. There is no just like test that can look at whether or not these genetic polymorphisms will lead to fibroids. But if we know a family history, then we also might know what may be in store for a woman. And then we can address treatment. We can look at how lifestyle can play a role in improving these problems. We can look at how medications can help alleviate some of the symptoms, and even surgery if needed. And so it's important to have an understanding that uterine fibroids are telling us that there is metabolic dysfunction, that maybe our life is a little bit out of sorts. And maybe that's hard to understand. Maybe that's hard to take an honest look at with ourselves. But there is a lot that we can do. There is some help that is out there. And just having an understanding of why these situations occur can be incredibly validating and return a lot of the power that women have back to us so that we can make educated decisions on what to do with our gynecologic problems. Well, that's it. If you found this video helpful, please like it, please share it with a friend, and go ahead and subscribe to Conscious Gynecologist. Thank you.